Sounds True presents Invisible Acts of Power, personal choices that create miracles, recorded in front of a small studio audience, with author and medical intuitive Carolyn Myss. And now Session 1, Generosity as a Spiritual Journey, with Carolyn Myss.
What makes someone a generous person? What makes us want to do for others? What makes us respond to others? This subject matter was inspired one afternoon. I was sitting on my porch and I was watching the street. It was a summer afternoon. It was this past summer. And across the street from me is a bus stop. And there was a kid standing at the bus stop, and he was, I don't know what, maybe 19 years old, and he was dressed the way I don't want my kids to dress. You know, he's got the baggy pants and the baggy clothes, and pierced and tattooed and, right, this sort of thing. And naturally, I did what every good mother would do. I looked over and thought, why are you like that? Why are you like that? What happened? Where did they go wrong, right? You see all this kind of thing. And then I made assumptions that someone who has 17 pierces, 35 tattoos, is probably unconscious and self-centered and all this other stuff. About that time, a woman's walking across the street. She's an older woman. She is probably in her mid-70s, so she's what you call the beginning of becoming an older person. But she's laden with heavy stuff. She's got bags, and it's obviously not easy for her to manage all these bags. She's heading toward a car. This kid turns around and looks at her, and I'm watching this whole thing. And I would have bet the ranch that he wouldn't notice her in a million years. But instead, this kid looks down the street to see where the bus is, turns around, makes a dash, and says, "Can I help you with these bags?" Picks them up, makes sure they get into the trunk of her car. Then he turns around, he's got a big smile on his face, and she's about to say thank you. And he says, and you could see what's going on. He's sort of shrugging it off and saying, "Oh, no problem, nothing." But then this woman gives him a huge bear hug. This gargantuanly warm bear hug. He bolts, he's laughing, he makes it to the bus stop, she gets in the car and takes off, and I'm on the porch. And I'm thinking to myself, that young man will never think twice about that. He'll hop on that bus and maybe think what a cute little old woman, or who knows if he ever thinks about it again. But she will never forget the young man who came to her rescue. Now, I thought about that, and I really paused and I thought about it. I thought about it too because I, of course, assumed he would never do that. So I had to ask myself, what am I thinking? What do I see when I see others? Why do you make an assumption, you make the assumption that people who are generous dress the part? What kind of assumptions do we make? You know, it was sort of interesting. I decided about that time that what I would do is a gift box of cards on acts of service. That, you know how they have healing box of cards where you pick a card and it's a sweet thought. This would be on spontaneous inspirations, the kinds of things you think, well, I don't know, I've got to do something nice today. I'll just pick a card and see what the gods tell me to do. So I thought, what a fun idea. And I sat down one day to write down all the fun, spontaneous acts of service I could come up with. I got up to 9. I thought, this is all I can come up with. Send a card to a friend. Send another card to another friend. I ran out, okay? And I thought, oh, man, I am desperate. So you know what I did? I wrote a letter and had it sent out on my the internet to all the people on my site. And I anticipated that I would get 70, maybe 80, maybe 90 letters back. I have thousands of people connected to the site. Within 8 days, over 1,200 letters poured in. Now, these letters are unbelievable. They're unbelievable. I started to read these letters and it took my breath away. What people have been through, what they've been able to endure themselves and on behalf of others and for others. The capacity that human beings have to be there for each other also made me look at the inability to be there for someone. It became as important for me to investigate why we cannot give as why we can give. Because if you look at generosity, it's a self-explanatory thing. It's why we find it difficult that became more intriguing to me in a certain way than why we find it easy. It's very easy to explain something easy. The challenging part is to take a look at it from the back door, which is, what is this call we have to be of service to each other? What is that all about? Now, I decided at that point that this needed to be a book and not a little box of cards, that it had inspired in me a couple of dozen questions or so that I'd never asked myself that needed to be asked. Now, when I had all these letters, my sister-in-law, Amy, who is a right and left hand to me, took on the task of organizing them for me. And what people do when they tell stories, and you might find yourself doing this yourself, is you will tend to categorize them. You might say, I met this Good Samaritan, or this person was just an angel. But you will find a way to categorize. You do it instinctively. This is an archetypal process. We just gut it that way. We gut script things. So if I looked at these letters, I realized they fell into categories. There are ways people list the wonderful acts of service that people have done for them, as well as what they're inclined to do for others. So I organized them. You know, there are certain people whose acts of service tend to be volunteering at group things. They don't do small volunteer privately. They're public volunteers. Okay, that's one form. As I organized these, what became very, very clear to me is that the spiritual path of service matches our biology, the biology of our chakras. That there are 7 forms of service. Now, if you look at this, if I looked at it, obviously, I mean, the 7th thing with me is everywhere. 7 chakras, 7 sacraments, 7 levels of the tree of life, 777, 7 levels of generosity. Yeah, you can take generosity, you can take anything and sculpt it into 7 perspectives. So from that point of view, that is what I did. But the truth is, this subject does have 7 levels to it. And it made me wonder, from the point of view of biology, what is the connection between generosity and biology? In other words, is being of service a biological necessity? Now that, you can think about being kind or being present for someone, but nobody's ever considered it from the point of view of, is it necessary to my health to be attuned to another person? All right, so look at that alchemy, and you have service on one hand, health on the other, but there's a gap here. What is the connecting link between being available to others in your health? What I realized is the connecting link is the alchemy of intuition. That in fact, intuition needs to come into play here. And, as I read these hundreds and hundreds of letters, many, many times people will say, I just had a feeling too. I just had a feeling that I should. I should have stopped. I didn't. I felt badly. I went around the block. the animal had been hit by a car by that time. There is a constant factor of guidance within you that engages the moment you meet somebody. This is the way you're attuned. This is the way you're wired. I knew and have always known and have always taught and will always teach that intuition is not a gift. It is your natural wiring. There are degrees of intuition, beginning with survival intuition, which is instinctive. You could eat a diet of cat food, and you would be absolutely intuitive when it comes to the instinctive intuition, and this nonsense that vegetarianism makes your antenna go up higher has got to stop. Who is doing that? They're doing it to annoy me, and it works. But from survival intuition, we work into an ascended form, which is conscious intuitive choice. It's one thing and everybody has had the experience of being with someone who drops something next to you and you instinctively bend down to pick it up. You're doing an act of service. Try it when you've got your arm full of goodies and everything would fall. That is an act of service. But you don't sit there and consciously think, should I? Shouldn't I? What would they say? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. No, you don't. You do it so instinctively that by the time you've given the person whatever it is they've dropped, that's when you realize you've just picked it up. That's a gut help. That comes under the heading of fundamental survival instinct help. Then there's a level that we move on to in which you give thought, consideration. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. You don't know. Maybe you could, maybe you won't, maybe it won't. This is where you start pondering generosity, where the consequence is much bigger, much greater, much more powerful. Here's the word, much more transformational to the individual, or not. Here's an example. Of all the many types of generosities that people list, I conclude that it's very easy to donate a few cans of goodies at the holiday season. That's the effortless generosity. That's the one that makes you feel better than them. Then there's intellectual generosity, the giving of an idea that could transform a person's life. I have many times been in a conversation with someone when I know the way out of it for them, because I'm quick that way. And I can listen to where someone's stuck. I can listen to what would help pull their ideas together. And I noted that intellectual generosity is not listed in acts of service by many people at all. Now, that's interesting to me, as are other very interesting absences, like the act of service of saying to someone, I'll deliver some meals to your house while you're down and out, and I'll make sure your kids are fed. That is a phenomenal, phenomenal service to somebody. But is it a transformational service, or is it a survival service? It's survival. It's not transformational. Transformational is a whole nother world that I discovered in doing this book and in producing all of this material. I never ever thought about the difference between what amounts to how easy it is to give someone a fish, how challenging it is to actually teach them to fish. That in fact, that's more intimidating to you than you would care to admit. And that's what I started to take a look at when I wrote this book. That in fact, the assumptions we make so often, that generosity has no limits, are false. It has a lot of limits. There's ceilings to it. And bursting through those ceilings is where your personal spiritual growth comes in. Well, let me just say here at this point, like an editorial disclaimer, Believe me, I am not saying to you, one form of generosity is better than another. That's ridiculous. If I'm freezing, I will take the coat in the moment versus your philosophical idea of how I can change my life. Okay, so let's just recognize that this is not a matter at all of evaluating what type of service is better than another. And I have to emphasize that great big huge. What I am saying is that now I want to take you into your world of how you perceive the other and why you perceive the other as you do. This is not about evaluating what's given. This is about investigating why we give, why we see others as we do, why we can give so much but not this, why it's easy for us to volunteer our time at a church social, but we simply cannot do that at a hospice. Why we draw the boundaries as we do. This is about taking a look at service as a personal spiritual journey, or to put it from a different perspective, to take a look at the spiritual journey through the eyes, the lessons, the challenges, and the call to be of service to one another. Because I believe that it is so incredibly built in to our interior life. And now connect the dot that the ingredient we are talking about, that all of this is really about, is self-esteem and the capacity to survive and your comfort zone with your own survival. It is that right there, your comfort zone with survival, your sense of self-esteem, that determines how fast and how clear your intuition awakens. And that, in turn, determines how you read another person and your openness to helping them and the extent to which and in which way you will help them. Now, I'm going to summarize this great big huge thing and put it into a quote that this man shared with me that summarized everything in one little thing. He said to me, Carolyn, if one of my best friends said, would you give me $1,000 to help pay the rent and put food on the table for my kids, I wouldn't hesitate. But if that same friend said, would you give me $1,000 to start a business, I wouldn't even consider it. I said, why? If you're going to part with $1,000, what difference does? He says, I'll tell you what the difference is. I will help my friend get by, but I will not help him pass me by. The sting of truth is in that. Great, big, huge. The sting of truth. And when I talk to you about the evolution of intuition, as it emerges in people, we move from the ability to provide visible acts of power to becoming empowered enough to provide invisible. What's an invisible act of power? The invisible act of power is something like being able to look at someone in a great deal of pain and realize they don't need a meal. They need respect. They need the gift of respect. They need to be listened to instead of judged. To be able to give an act of power over to someone where you say to them, hang in there, you really can make this work. One woman told me a story. She said that she was a model, and she said the modeling world's very, very competitive. Doubly so, maybe triply, I don't know, but because everybody thinks their field's the most competitive, of course, but in the modeling world, the body, the face, the this, the age, everything is at stake. And she said that models are exceedingly competitive and very insecure behind the scenes because the slightest flaw ends a career. So she said one day a novice model, a new model, came on the set and they were shooting something. And the girl put on, she was all poofed and dressed and ready to go. And she said to this woman, "Do I look okay?" This woman said to me, I knew what she was really asking. Translation: I did an intuitive reading and I could feel that it was her insecurity that was reaching out for support. That's what she was really saying to me. And that's what she really knew was taking place. So now she's in a position of choice, isn't she? She can say, "You look smashing, give it your best shot." But what she did say was, "Well, it's not bad. Really, it's not bad. Really, you'll be able to do just fine." The girl was devastated. Devastated, and apparently couldn't make it back for the afternoon shoot. This woman said to me, "I knew exactly what I'd done, and I didn't even feel badly. It's every man for himself." You can look and say, "What a pity, you've done it." You know you have. Every one of us has, at one point in our lives, looked at someone and realized the real act of generosity is invisible. It's acceptance, it's respect, it's a shot of self-esteem, it's a dose of hope, but it's not $5 in the pocket. That's what's true. What became so intriguing to me is, what is that journey that brings us from being able to volunteer at some public social where all our friends are, so it's our good time, and everybody sees how generous we are, to actually behind the scenes being able to provide an invisible act of power that is transformational because you're giving what's really needed: a shot of self-respect, a drop of integrity, a dose of hope that in the long run transforms this person's life. The ability to be creatively generous is very hard. It's very hard. What if you really did have the solution to somebody's problem, but you didn't like them, or you were insecure? Could you be that generous? Oh, maybe not. Maybe you'd say, "Well, I'm great at picking up someone's lunch tab, but I won't help them earn enough money so that they can pick up mine." This is what we have to ask ourselves. This is what I realized in organizing these letters. That, in fact, intuition and the capacity to really sense what that person needs beyond the crisis is where the healer in each of you comes in. That takes you from ordinary mortalship to recognizing this is a potential act of healing. That's what's really going on here. This soul is shattered. The body may be hungry. The spirit is shattered. Which one am I going to feed? This is what the scriptures are all about. You know, in doing this book, I'll tell you, I tumbled right back into the mystical wonderland, the enchantment. Once again, I saturated myself in spiritual teachings because I sprinkle them through the pages of every tradition. And I found that I had a feeling, to give you an image, that I was walking the ancient streets with these letters in my hands, looking at people who were reaching to a figure like Jesus, sitting at the feet of someone like Buddha, and saying, "I am starving." And the Buddha said, "Which would you like me to feed? Your body or your spirit? Which shall give you eternal life?" And I realized that when you look at every human being, you have the choice to see them through the eyes of what's really going on. But the reality is, people want to become intuitive, to cover themselves. because it enhances their lives. It'll make them a better healer. It will make them live a more secure life. Always it comes down to security. It always comes down to security. Intuition we are the only culture in the whole universe that I know of that has made intuition a product. And has done something even more foolish, made it a spiritual product. As if somehow or other, the signature of God is clear intuition for the sake of street occupation. Gamblers are some of the best intuitives you're ever going to meet in your life, not to mention criminals, not to mention anybody who is simply a good stockbroker. Intuition is not the result of fasting and praying and some indication that God favors you over the densely unintuitive. What is it with people? I will never understand. Really, it just absolutely is hilarious to me how desperate we are for acknowledgement in our humility. So, what I'm talking to you about is that it takes a tremendous amount of courage to awaken to others and to be able to resonate with a person and realize you are hungry, but you also need this. So when I buy your meal, I'm going to leave you with this. You're going to be able to do this for yourself. So let's just have this meal, but let me add something. You'll get out of this situation. I'm remembering one letter that was positively breathtaking for me. Here's an example of someone who is one of those unbelievably gifted healers who would never call herself that. This woman writes that she was in college, a single mother, and trying desperately to make ends meet. She said she was doing it real well, but then things just got too difficult. And she finally had to apply for state aid. She said for her it was the most humiliating thing in the world. And the day that she left for the application, to put in the application, she looked at her daughter, who was about 2 years old, 18 months, and thought, what would you think of your mother if you knew she was going to beg? So she gets to the welfare office. She said, I was sitting there filling out the papers. I couldn't even look at the woman across the table from me. I could not make eye contact with her. I was so embarrassed. She said the woman looked at her and said, now just 1 minute, slammed her hand down on the desk, got up, walked around, and said, we're going to start this over again. She says, we're going to start this with a hug. She said, this is what I'm here for. And someday, you're not going to need this. In fact, you'll pay it back in your taxes. And then the woman said to me in her letter, as she recalled this, I'm not that young girl anymore. I'm a successful attorney, and I'm very successful. And I take care of people who sit in that chair. Now, I'm going to put you in slow motion now, and I'm going to take you back through that. That woman working in that welfare office has probably never in the whole of her life said, I'm a healing intuitive. She's never had the need for that sort of nonsense labeling of her so-called powers. Rather, she simply is present with a generous heart. This is the consequence of two things. This is the alchemy that comes from having enough sense of yourself where someone else's resurrection does not frighten you. You can handle the death. Can you take the resurrection? Where someone's resurrection is something you can support. And not look at and say, oh, well, what if you do make it better? As a lawyer, you're going to earn 100 million zillion times more than me in this little state job. Why should I help you do that? Instead, she sensed her role as a spiritual servant and said, you know what, let's deal with what's really going on here, and that's healing your spirit. To truly be generous at the level of spirit where you realize, where you're cognizant of the fact that one generous hug is enough to heal that person and start them anew. Where you finally really get that the true generosity is all invisible and the visible takes care of itself. That to give someone a basket of food with a condescending attitude destroys them. It may feed their body, but it destroys them. To give them a sandwich with hope builds them. I know I have these letters that stand as proof of what I'm saying to you. But I believe that if you are listening, if you're listening to this, you can feel the truth of what I'm saying to you, that this journey is one we're all on. This is a journey we have to recognize that our capacity to feel our own sense of self-esteem determines how intuitively available we are to another person. That intuition and intuitive openness is a matter of self-esteem and feeling we can take care of our own security far more than it is a spiritual reward for good behavior. It's based on survival. If this woman in the welfare office obviously was so in her interior sense of security that she could turn around and say to anybody, you're going to make it in this world. And not measure it with, but are you going to pass me by? Let me see now. If you're going to pass me by, I'll tell you what. Well, I'll just say maybe you'll get through. Maybe I'll help you out this way. I've seen people like you before in welfare. Some of them actually make it. I'll do some qualified generosity. I'll put a little stick in there, a little guaranteed fall somewhere along the line. Or are you really capable of saying, oh, don't worry about this. Let me tell you something. I've seen, this is life. Here comes the resurrection, and you've got what it takes. You're going to fly. This is actually fabulous. Let's turn this into the best thing that's ever happened to you. But we have to, that's the whole point. The journey of the interior generous spirit is one in which we have got to look at ourselves and say, what's scaring us about our own lives that we cannot reach that extra step to help when someone is scared about their life. Now, I want to share a letter with you that is an example of someone who could not do that. Why this letter stood out is because it is a perfect example of someone who could observe a need, but he couldn't let it touch him. One of the things I've realized is that we find people who are exhibiting our insecurities, who embody them, who are living them, to be singularly repulsive. I certainly notice this. In reading these letters, I feel like saying, I'm taking their word for it. And in their language, homeless people represent the absolute inability to survive. The absolute inability to survive. Now, in all of these letters, comments about the homeless are noted in great numbers. A couple of very interesting things people note are whether or not they give to the homeless, don't, avoid, ignore, judge, not judge. But believe me, out of these hundreds and hundreds of letters, noting how they feel about the homeless is something people go out of their way to do in these letters. Now, that's fascinating to me. It's fascinating. What it does tell me, and what I will believe forevermore, is there's no such thing as not noticing a human being in need. I don't care what anyone says anymore. No one will ever again be able to say to me, I didn't notice that person. Yes, you did. You may not want to admit it, but don't tell me you didn't notice. Now, when I define intuition, I'm telling you, when you walk down the street, you are the size of that street. Don't kid yourself. Your sensors go from one side of that block to the other. You sense every single thing in that area. Whether or not you want to respond to it is a whole nother can of worms. You can have your eyes focused on the Cartier window or whatever else, but don't tell me you don't sense that person, because you do. I wouldn't have taught this before this book. Now I will forevermore. This is what I mean about consciousness. We would implode if we knew how much we sensed. It's why it kind of goes up in volume in degrees. But I will never believe someone did not notice a vulnerable human being on the street at one level of your senses. You may not have seen them, but I assure you, you felt them. I assure you this. Now, this letter stands out because of someone who feels he's trying to, I'll tell you why he wrote this letter. He's trying to impress me with his writing style. But what he impressed me with was his ability to observe the human condition and keep his distance while having one foot in it, but observing the crisis at a distance because he was so repelled by the crisis. So intrigued by how other people responded to something he felt so repelled by. And in the end, this letter is a way of assuaging his guilty conscience. But as I said to him, the pen will only work once. Next time you get your hands dirty. So, listen to this. It was a calm evening in San Francisco with a small breeze and a slight chill. Along Van Nuys Avenue walked the usual assortment of people, young couples hand in hand, a few older people either alone or in couples, and of course the homeless out panhandling. I walked toward Tammy's Joint, a popular Hans Braun, where I planned to have dinner. As I neared the corner to the restaurant's entrance, I saw two homeless men. One was a middle-aged man sitting on the pavement with his back against a mailbox. He looked filthy dirty. His face, his black-gray hair, and his beard were lined with dried sweat and dirt. His clothes were old and blackened with dirt and filth. Under his thick eyebrows, his eyes appeared glazed, unfocused, as if his mind was in another world, and from his speech, babbling incoherent, I gathered that he was in another world or perhaps schizophrenic. In front of the entrance stood an older man, also in his clothes, but his were only moderately dirty, and he appeared calm and coherent. He knew where he was and exactly what he was doing. As I approached the restaurant entrance, a young, very attractive couple walked out. They were handsome and well-dressed, looking very happy, intelligent, and affluent. The beautiful young woman held a white styrofoam takeout box in her hand. The older man stepped up to them, saying, "Money for food?" At that instant, I darted past them, thus avoiding having to deal with the panhandling. As I entered the restaurant, the young woman extended the takeout box to the older man, who immediately took the box and said very graciously, "Thank you, God bless you." I turned to look because offering and accepting the food was not what I had expected would happen. The older man smiled at the couple, then turned toward the mailbox where the middle-aged man was sitting. He opened the box. There was half a meal in it, along with a plastic knife and fork. The older man used the knife to cut off the top of the box, and then he carefully placed it on the mailbox. He then pushed half the food into the box top, and placing the fork next to the food, the older man bent down to the other man and held the food in front of him. Very gently he said, "Here, brother, have something to eat." The middle-aged man looked up dimly. He seemed only vaguely aware that someone was talking to him. The older man spoke again very kindly, saying, "Come on, brother, here's some food." From far away, this man slowly began to come back. His eyes started to partially focus. He looked confused as he inhaled the smell of food that was right in front of his face. Slowly he came back into this world, able to understand that someone was offering him food. The older man waited patiently. Finally, when the middle-aged man seemed to understand, the older man said, "Come on, brother, have something to eat." Numbly, the middle-aged man took the food, muttered thanks, and slowly found the fork and began to eat. The older man picked up the other half of the box of food, sat down next to the middle-aged man, and together they began to eat. Now, this story stands out because it represents so much about how his gift, the author's generosity, is the telling of the tale. But it serves him, doesn't it? It's fine. It's a wonderful story. But do you understand what I'm saying? That this story reveals that someone's not willing to risk to go into the interior of the crisis, but to manage it in a way they don't get their hands dirty. Now, next time this man is in that circumstance, God willing, he won't be able to get away with a good story on a piece of paper. It's going to happen, or this wouldn't have happened. One of the reasons this story so touched me is because it's deeply apparent to me that these two men were starving for respect and not food, for dignity, for recognition, and not for half a sandwich. If someone looks at you, you come in and says, "Do you have money?" I remember my father. My father was one of the most generous men. He may have been the most generous man I've ever known. He never passed a homeless person without giving them something. If it was a nickel, dollar, dime, but he never passed a homeless person. And I said to him, "Why?" And he said, "Because you're not the one asking, and that is your prayer. You have it to give, and so you give. You don't pass a homeless person." I think so many times I've heard someone say they probably got $1,000. What do I care if they're sitting on $1 million? That's not what God looks at. Looks at what motivates me. I don't care if they have all the money in the world. I look at that, and I am looking at, except for the grace of God go I. It is absolutely amazing. You want to know? Here, I'll leave you another story with this. It's just too good. The woman is driving to work every day, and she said there was a man who was homeless, but he sold newspapers on the corner. And she said normally she's very uncomfortable around homeless people. But they started to make eye contact, and pretty soon she would buy newspapers from him every morning, even though she didn't really like the paper. It didn't matter. This is what was happening. And she said it was Easter time, and she went to buy an Easter basket and all the goodies for her daughter, and it occurred to her to buy him one. And she said, "Now, what would make me think that this homeless man," and she was a nurse, and she said, "I recognize the signs of addiction written all over him." She said, "What would make me think that this addict would want an Easter basket full of chocolate and fake grass?" She said, nevertheless, she filled this Easter basket. So then she takes the basket, and she's driving down the street, and she sees him, and she thinks, "Oh, I can't do this. This is so ridiculous. This is so ridiculous." She gets there. He walks up with the paper. She looks over and glances at the Easter basket thinking, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? She grabs it and she says, I did a basket for you. Happy Easter." And he stood there. She said that time stood still when she saw his face. And he stepped back and said, "I have something for you." Reached into his pocket and gave her the holy card he had carried all of these years on the street. And the holy card said, God bless you. God bless you. Now, just think about that for 1 minute. As I looked through these letters, I realized how true it is that it's not easy for us to give what's actually being asked for. Acceptance, respect, and that's what this book became for me, is a mission to talk about exactly this journey. Let me tell you how service lines up to the choreography of the chakras, because that's intriguing, and we will explore this subject in this order. And that's chakra 1 is the gifts of the earth, food and shelter. That's the level of generosity people begin their engagement with. And it's logical. No 5-year-old is taught to intuit the psycho-emotional, spiritual needs of their neighbor. They're taught, share your sandwich. So this is where we learn. The second chakra, as I'll describe to you when we get there, represents the gifts of survival, like financial and creative generosity. The third chakra is gifts of self-esteem, unconditional support, the capacity to be generous with someone's interior force. Now, these are 3, what I call the lower chakra survival generosity programs, if you will. And these have a very different quality in terms of survival, instinct, intuition. The upper deck, the 4th through 7th chakra, is more conscious. More conscious. You will debate whether or not you're going to do the following, whereas you instinctively respond to the lower level. I promise you, you will instinctively provide someone with a half a sandwich if you have lunch. You open up and say, here, would you like a half? That's instinct. That's polite tribal instinct, survival, whatever. But if you knew the person sitting opposite you was desperately poor, you would have to ponder, should I give them $100? Should I not? Maybe they're really, I don't know. You could maybe spend $100 and not think twice, but you would then. Do you see? There is a difference. The 4th chakra is the generosity that comes in the form of kindness, love, forgiveness, and compassion. The generosity of forgiveness, I can tell you for a fact, you think about a lot more than you do the generosity of a bag of canned goods at Thanksgiving. So now we're into a level of life transformational energy that is very, very different. It's one thing to volunteer an afternoon. Then there are people who are capable of saying, I'll go through this with you, whatever a this is. I'll be there at your side. Not everybody can do that. And I have to again and again emphasize that I truly am not talking about giving in terms of length of time, amounts of money. I am so not talking about that, although those are the examples I'm going to have to use. What I want to highlight again and again and again is that these things are, like in the language of Buddhism, illusions. They're the currency we need to have with and among each other. But what really matters is the reason why I will stand by your side. If I know you're in trouble and you're going through a difficult thing, and I say, I'll always be there for you, but I'm really there because I have romantic ideas. I'm really there because I need to be needed. Who am I serving? You or me? Who am I serving? You or me? If, on the other hand, I realize, like some of these extraordinary stories, where a couple had an anniversary. It was their special anniversary. It was a 20th or 25th, or when they didn't know what to give each other. So they thought about it. They took a look around, and they decided they would give each other an act of service, and they took in someone who needed a home. And that was their anniversary present. Because they'd created such a comfortable life that they decided that they would share that abundance with someone who needed it. It was a person who was very ill. Now, to listen to that story, they weren't so abundant that they had like a whole wing on their house and 15 servants to take care of this person. They had to rebalance their budget to take this person in. And then they organized other people to rebuild this person's house, to renovate it a little bit, because the guy lived in a shack. And then they put on his back porch, and in the meantime, they took him to and fro his radiation and chemotherapy treatments. And then, of course, they had to deal with his financial papers. My God, they found out he hadn't paid his back taxes in years, 5 years to be exact. Well, what were they going to do then? They decided garage sales and raffles, that's what they do. They bailed him out. Not only did they bail him out of his financial crisis, they redid his home. Not a mansion, a small home that he could go back into. And then you know what? He healed. It is an overwhelming journey to experience a story like this couple told, because in helping someone, they didn't have an agenda. The generosity of not projecting your agenda on someone. Did you ever think of that one? To give without your agenda interfering in the gift. To not say, I'm going to help you heal, but you better heal, because then it means I have failed. Or I'm not half the healer I think I need to be. They didn't even go near that. That was not part of their intention. Their intention was, we're going to take him in because he needs love and he needs a family, and we've got that to give. They had no intention wrapped up in that. What they did was they were attuned, intuitive, present, loving in the moment as the circumstance called for. It seemed like when they took him in and they started to nurture him and nourish him, he started to respond. Imagine that. Who knew? Started to respond to the treatments. And pretty soon out of those responses, they took a look at his house and decided, we need a little help here. So they went in and they started to clean it up. It was a mess. Apparently he was eclectic. Magazines, junk, this, that, everything, everywhere. Well, they pitched it, didn't even tell him about half the stuff because they thought, well, maybe that would, like, he'd interfere. They figured, he's not going to need it. They didn't think he wouldn't need it because he was going to die. They thought better he knows that he's just got to stop collecting this stuff. So then they decided this place needs to be cleaned. Then they got the neighbors. They put on a new roof, back porch. And then they found he had no money. Didn't bother them. It was not a big deal. It probably was a big deal to their wallet, but not to their souls. So then they gathered the neighbors and they said, look at this guy, 5 years behind on his back taxes. Well, what are we going to do now? It wasn't disgusting to them. It wasn't horrible. It was just one more thing we got to deal with because they loved him. So then they decided, all right, what do we got here to sell? And they created a garage sale. They all pitched in. What do you got? What do you got? What do you got? What do you got? And they sold it and they made the money. They also had a raffle. They made the money. They got it. All right, now we dealt with that. Nothing was insurmountable because they loved him. And they loved without an agenda. They didn't say, Jesus, how much time is this going to take? How much effort? How much this? How much that? And he lived. He was supposed to die. He's back at work. He's back at work. Oh, and by the way, his occupation, he's one of those people that does nothing but help others. What are you going to do? So, that is a sample of fourth chakra generosity. Fifth chakra. This is generosity of courage and guidance. And we'll talk about that in depth. But I never thought about guidance as being a matter of generosity. But it is. Think about the quality of guidance you're capable of giving people and how you deliver it. How you deliver it. There are numerous letters I have of people who said, one of the greatest acts of service someone did for me was to tell me I was out of line. But it's the way they did it that was so generous. I mean, feel that. One man said to me, he's a fireman. This man said, I would rather run into a burning building to save someone than to have to tell someone, like this friend of mine, that I know he's an addict. I don't have the courage to face him with that truth, but I can face a fire. Now, that's the quality of generosity, to have enough courage to say this might cause this friendship, but either I'm going to lose your life or lose the friendship. I'd rather save the life and lose the friendship. Incredible generosities. So we move to the next, which is the sixth chakra, is generosity of wisdom and optimism. It is very interesting, but you may not consider optimism a gift of generosity, and you have no idea how much it is. One good dose of hope, are you kidding? And what I can't get over is how many people have said that's all it took was one person in 1 minute. The last is angels in disguise, which is the seventh chakra, angels and Samaritans. The stories I have of people who have been in the most one man, oh, what a story, what a story, what a story. He's a wild man on his motorcycle. Wild man. One adventure after another, here, there, everywhere. And then one day, typical of Wild Men 101, they always think they're invincible, right? So, and he wrote about this so deliciously with all of his invincibility. And then one night, it was one of those classic snowy nights, full moon, still, pine trees, big stars, get the setting. He crashes right into a deer. Psycho goes flying, he goes flying, the deer's dead. He's in the middle of nowhere. He is in the middle of nowhere. Then he hears footsteps in the snow, those crunchy, crunchy footsteps that you hear when it's 4 degrees, no breeze, coming out from behind the trees in the middle of nowhere with no lights. The presence bends down and says, I'll hold you till the help comes. They're on their way. This person showed up within seconds of the accident. He can't see. Who are you? Where are you? I'm right here. Then he sees lights coming, and it was an ambulance. Who called? He said, where is she when they got there? Who? How did you know? How did you get the call? We were just driving down the street. No, you can't. Look, buddy, just relax. We're going to get you to a hospital. You're in trouble. He says, I'll be okay. I know it. That's an angel and Samaritan story. Now we're talking about divine generosity. Now we're talking about generosity that comes to you from places greater than yourself. So, this is the lineup of the chakras. Now then, as we proceed, I want you to keep a few things in mind, if you would. And that's that there are certain laws of the universe that order life. And there are even laws of the universe that seem to manage generosity, that seem to manage the journey of the soul emerging into consciousness. So I want you to keep these in mind. There are no such thing as coincidences, accidents, or synchronicities. There really aren't. Now, why is that law important? Because when people show up to help you, or when you just happen to be there for someone else, don't dismiss that as luck, but as divine choreography at its best. There's a reason why people show up. There's a reason why a prayer is heard from a mother in the back of a car in a frozen field in Minnesota, temperature 11 below zero, 2 children freezing, huddled under her coat. And she's praying, I don't know how I'm going to survive this, but how will they survive this? Early in the morning, they'd fallen asleep. They were starving. They were freezing. There was a knock at the car window. Someone had noticed the car in the field. Next thing you know, the car is surrounded by food, blankets, and they gave her a home. I don't know, the prayers, do they travel out of the windows? I guess they do, eh? It's just one of those incredible truths that I learned in this journey with this material, that there is no such thing as a prayer that's not heard. There's just no such thing. It may be that it doesn't come in the way you want it to. Oh, well, then you have to use the way it does come. If you're walking and you are in need of your own form of food in a styrofoam box, whatever's in there should be the meal you're grateful for. No matter what. Even if the styrofoam box is a human being that sits next to you on a bus and happens to have the one kind thought you really need to survive and not commit suicide. As so many people have noted, if it wasn't for that one kind thought, I would have gone home and overdosed. It is just amazing. Another law, pay attention to. Rely on the laws of energy. Visualize your needs and support of others through kindness and compassion. When you have a need in your own life, and you do, you will, that's life. Visualize that need going out like on an internet and then let it go. Just let it go. And that's that. And whatever you do, don't curse yourself by saying, I don't see how this can work out. Don't ever say that again. Don't ever curse yourself with nonsense. You tell yourself it can only work out. Everything works out. It's working out. Just live in it. It's working out. This is the way it's working out. Everything today is helping this work out. It's working out. Don't think like an ordinary mortal. Always keep in mind that what you do for others and what is done in support of your life has healing consequences for the whole of humanity. That is so true. You help one person, you help everyone. They say in the Torah, you save one person, you've saved humanity. These kinds of teachings, these kinds of truths, they're so big that they sound just like cute little truths because we are so desperate to see the consequences of our actions, that the power of the invisible acts seem not to have the power because we're so desperate to see the consequences of our work, which is another reason why invisible acts of power are so difficult to actually ascend to, because you may never see the consequence of your one word of kindness. This is where that level of trust simply has to be there. Ultimately, everything you do, if done consciously, can become an invisible act of power for someone in your life, including yourself. And you will always receive help within a second of a prayer, maybe a microsecond. You need only see everything in your life from that second on as part of the answer to a prayer. I marvel at how many people think the gods are deaf and they require candles and fasting and lights and this and that and whatever else, and all the gizmos and trinkets and medals and beads and flowers and all this. You require that. Heaven doesn't. If that's the kind of stuff you need, go ahead and use it. Who cares? But it's completely unnecessary. It's just fun trinkets. What's really true is the interior life is one with the interior life. Better to live in the truth that every thought's a prayer and just monitor yourself from that point on. Something doesn't convert into a prayer because you declare it to be a prayer. You understand what I'm saying? Thoughts have power, end of it. You decide, but this thought's a prayer, so it has big, huge power. Are you crazy? Every thought. It's always, always, always the intention with which we put together our words, our actions, and our deeds that matter, period. So now, I'm going to move us all into the human energy system. But as a prelude to getting into that, I want to discuss grace. I have wanted to write about grace for a long time. I wanted to lecture on it, but it's a funny kind of subject because grace is one of those topics that somehow or other you can't prove, you can't this, you know, it's a funny sort of thing. But if you've ever experienced the presence of grace, you know it. You know when you've been in that energy. The college I went to is also a convent. And there is a chapel in the convent grounds that has always had a sister praying in it since it was built, which is now over 150 years ago. It has never been absent of someone praying in this chapel. It's very small, and it's very, very beautiful. When I am in that chapel, it's one of the places where the silence is sweetly penetrating. And I don't know if it's a combination of being so awestruck with the history of that particular chapel or just with the sense of whatever that presence is in there. But that was one of the first places where I knew that grace had a frequency unto itself, that there really was such a thing as an energy field of the sacred, that there's an energy field of holiness around everybody, that is for sure, or a lot of holes, holiness or holes, however you want to look at it. But then there is this thing called charism, a grace that is unique to your contract, unique to your spiritual calling, unique to what you are and who you are. Charism is viewed in certain theological circles. If you can consider, that's the funny thing about the study of God. How can there really be an expert? There's simply how much have you read, but who at the end of the day, we are each our own experts in the experience of our own relationship to God. That is what's true. But having said that, I think we benefit a great deal from the knowledge that others have accumulated about their experience with God. And I think that bringing God into this particular subject matter is for me unbelievably necessary, because God came into this so deeply for me as I was reading the letters of hundreds and hundreds of people who were speaking about divine intervention in their lives, even if they didn't use that word, or they were speaking about seeing God in others and they weren't perhaps using that word. And one teaching is that there is this energy called charism, meaning the gift of grace bestowed upon you without the need for prayer. It is spontaneous grace that comes to you just because it comes to you. It is an energy that surrounds you, that comes to you, or that you request in that sense of, I need the high voltage stuff. And I offer that to you as something to think about, to hold, to memorize, to put in your heart, so that when there are moments in your life when you feel, I need divine intervention, remember that word. When I read the many stories of people that I share with you, I thought of charism. I thought, this is grace around them, that there is a certain protection from a woman in the field by herself with her children freezing, to a hungry person who just happened to meet somebody who bought 2 lunches by accident. What is that about? Who buys 2 lunches by accident? Who happens to run into a homeless person? These types of things, that homeless person, I believe that there is an energy of grace that surrounds people, that draws them together. The one who has the extra lunch, the one who needs the extra lunch. So I need to have that quality of grace in your mind and heart as I continue this, because I believe that so many of the stories and so much of your life is surrounded by a quality of grace you never thought about. That's the wonderment of grace. You probably have more of a field of grace that you, left to your own devices, would bang into a wall if you didn't have as much grace around you as you do. I would never have taught this before. Now, I'm telling you now, I just feel like it's everywhere around people. I never, ever really thought about people in slow motion. That's the only way to put it. Now, as a result of this work, I look at everybody in slow motion. I don't know who you are, why you're in my life, but you're in my life, therefore I put you in slow motion. I don't care about your form. I'm so eager to touch your spirit. And I'm not in the sense of, I want to get to know you and chat spirit. I haven't got time for that stuff. But somehow now, I think, I wonder how many angels are protecting you, me. I don't know. Do the gods want us to talk? I don't know. I'll leave it up to the gods. But everything has been reframed for me. And that to me is the grace of charism. Now we're going to walk into the first chakra, into the first examination of invisible acts of power, beginning with visible ones.
This concludes Session 1 of Invisible Acts of Power. Our program continues with Session 2.